So it is the I don't know, let's have a look, I've forgotten, 25th of August, 2021. This is question time. We are live. I'm at home. I'm casual again. Everyone that I know mocked me last week for being casual, so I thought I would do it again. Jokes aside, I actually forgot to change into my shirt and I ran out of time, so you're stuck with me in casual attire again. Lot to go through today. So very much looking forward to getting into it. Again, I've stuffed up here. Well, maybe third time lucky. Next week we won't have the same trouble. So let's start today's session. Those of you that are new won't have done this. Those of you who've been here for a while, I want to know from everyone, what is more important? Is it information or knowledge? So take a moment, have a think about it. Information or knowledge? All right, so the answer is knowledge. Now, for those of you that are thinking, oh, but it doesn't matter, there's never a wrong answer. Well, in this case, there is. And I want to explain to you why. So, information is organized data about something. Knowledge, on the other hand, is an understanding either through education or experience. So, if you can think about it, it's not information in itself, it's that knowledge about the information that is actually what is most powerful and is going to be most helpful for you wherever you are on your home ownership journey. So I want to take you back to 2007. I had just had a Japanese American company invest into my business. They were bringing over a group of Japanese investors that were going to invest into some real estate deals that we had on the go. So very exciting, big transformational time for the business. And I'd set up what I thought was a fantastic tour. We were doing a 3-day tour. We were in Sydney, we're in Melbourne, and we're in Brisbane. And what did I do? I organised all of the largest real estate agencies, their research guys, to put on a 1 to 2 hour presentation to these Japanese investors to explain all about the local market and what was going on. I thought it went fantastic. We were running from city to city in 3 days straight, and it was great. We saw all the investors off, bar 1 or 2 that afternoon, and we went back to our office and we had sort of those kitchens / breakout areas that you sit around. And those that were still with us, we just got a couple of bottles of wine, some biscuits from the Woolworths, and just sat around and had a bit of a chat. And I was embarrassed once again. Sam, who was the owner of the company and invested in my business, he said, that was the worst tour I have ever had. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, it was terrible. You didn't tell us anything. And I'm thinking, but I had the best of the best. He said, all you did was pound us with information. You had all these people that we didn't invest in, we're not investing in, pound us with all this information. But at no point did you explain to us, what does that mean for us investing with you? And what's your opinion on this and what is going to happen for me? So I learned a very, very valuable lesson that day. And that's why I say to you, it's the knowledge rather than the information, because anyone can give you information. We all know we can pick up our phones, jump on Google, jump on social media, jump on TV, whatever it is, and pick up a ton of information. But what is most important is, how does that work for you? So from that day forward, I vowed to change. I transformed it around. I made sure that every piece of information that I ever shared with anyone, I broke it down to what it means and what it would mean for them. And that is what is all about knowledge. And that's what today's session is all about. So don't be like me 10 odd years ago, no, 15 years ago, even longer than that. Be like me today and make sure that you focus on creating that knowledge out of that information. Warren Buffett says it really, really well here, that risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. So just having information is not going to be enough. You need to have that knowledge. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to run for about 30 minutes or so. We tend to go a little bit longer when we are in lockdown, just because people ask a lot of questions. If you do have to go early, there will be a recording, so don't stress. It'll be up on our YouTube channel probably tomorrow. The first section we're going to do is the information portion. I'm going to run through what's been happening around the country over the last 7 days. That'll go for about 10 minutes. Then we'll move into the knowledge section, where we're going to take all of your questions live, break down all of that information I shared with you at the start, and help you work out how to apply that to yourself and your personal circumstances. So let's get stuck into the first section. This will go, as I said, for 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how quickly I run through it. So what's been happening around the country in the last 7 days? Spring selling season, almost upon us, 25th. So what have we got? 6 days until we move into spring. What does that mean, given that more than half the country is locked down? New South Wales hit a record of 920 corona cases today. But it's okay. The Premier is already talking about easing restrictions. So things should be okay. What about household finances? You know, this is a different time. It's not 2020 anymore. Should we be worried? Are things going to get from bad to worse? What about if you want to save a few dollars? Should you be self-managing your own investment property? We're going to talk about that. Equity, with prices going up, a lot of people have built up a ton of equity in their homes. What are they doing and what should they be doing? We'll break that down for you. And then lastly, why are people still bidding prices up? Why are we seeing such great, strong house price growth when no one is getting a pay rise? No one's getting those big boosts as they would hope. Wage growth is basically stagnant over the last 2 years. So why are prices still going up if people don't have more money to spend on housing? Okay, so last weekend's auction results, as a whole, pretty ordinary compared to what we've been used to be seeing. You can see here we had just a overall national clearance of just over 63%. That's the lowest that we've had since I think it was July last year. Not a great result there, albeit still a good clearance result. You can obviously see it was Melbourne that brought down that total there very much so. So, why did we see this happen? First of all, I think it's important to understand how they make up those statistics. So in Melbourne alone, there was a third of these 1,000 auctions were withdrawn. So that is, they didn't actually go to auction. So those count as a result because they were withdrawn and they weren't cleared. So you're already seeing those figures skewed. So, if you took a third off that and you're seeing what's cleared, this would be a much higher clearance rate, probably in the high 60s, early 70s. But look, that is the way the statistics work. Why did that happen? Well, for those of you that are based in Melbourne, you'll know, obviously, we'd been 2 weeks in. Everyone was pretty confident that we would be out. So those auctions that were there got deferred to last weekend and potentially this weekend. So we're probably going to see a similar result occur this time next week with a number of auctions getting pulled and deferred until we're back open. So that skewed those figures, but I think it was still good to see that houses still went through. And I think this will just be a blip. As I said, if you sort of reconcile those numbers, it's actually still a pretty strong result. Interestingly, what we did see in the two major markets, more than 50% of those sales that were cleared in Melbourne occurred prior to auction. So definitely we're seeing people just jumping on and saying, if I want that place, let's just secure it. And sellers obviously thinking, is it worth going to auction given I can't have it on site and doing Zoom? Should I just take that offer if I'm happy with that price? Definitely seeing there. Sydney, 62% of those sales that were cleared. So you can see there was about 370 sales that were cleared. So probably about 180 or so of those, in fact, even more, probably 200 odd, were all pre-auction offers that were accepted. So definitely I think we're seeing sellers realizing if they don't want to risk the Zoom auction, if they get an offer that is what they want, they're just jumping on it and taking it because it is still significantly higher than they were probably ever thinking of getting this time last year when we're in the doldrums. So that's definitely seen coming through. Be interesting to see what happens next week, but definitely I wouldn't read too much into this. I know there's been a lot of scaremongering going on in the mainstream or the lamestream news about these auction clearance rates and that Melbourne's in for a world of hurt. It's not right. As I said, you've got to break down that information and understand it. And once you do, you realise it's still a pretty strong result. Okay, let's move forward to looking at the forward-looking estimates that we've got here. So these are lead indicators that we talk about. This is from realestate.com. They are the largest listings portal in Australia. They create two index. One is for what activity they're seeing on their website in terms of sales listings, and the other is in terms of rental listings. So they create this index effectively saying, based on a baseline from the average they saw across 2019, where is the activity trending across their website, month to month, day to day, week to week, year to year, in terms of what they believe is high intent activity. So it's not an exact science. It's things like, are you making an inquiry? Are you downloading floor plans? Are you going back multiple times and looking at those listings? I think we all know by now that all these large technology companies, they know more about us than we know about ourselves because they track everything that we do on the internet. So they use all that data they've got to try to produce a bit of an intent in terms of what they believe is happening. So nationally, we saw the index drop, which is to be expected. Clearly, lockdowns are having an effect. I think anyone that thinks that the fact that not being able to go and inspect a property, definitely here in Melbourne, when we look at the Melbourne figure, is having a huge impact because people are not prepared to transact on a $700,000, $800,000 property, $1 million property, a $500,000 property, whatever it is, without actually seeing it. And that's probably why, flicking back to those auction results, we saw a slightly stronger clearance in Sydney, albeit the same number of cleared auctions, because they are still allowing one-on-one inspections. Something our Victorian government should look at, but hopefully we're out of it before the wheels of bureaucracy start turning on that. So, we're definitely seeing, as people are expecting that they can't go and look at properties, these lockdowns are biting, that they're just putting off those decisions. If we move through to our local market here, unsurprisingly, you can see a pretty steady drop straight off the cliff in terms of intent. As I said, people are saying, well, if I can't go and look at it, what am I going to waste my time on there organising inspections and so forth when I don't know what's going to go on? Don't be too alarmed. As you can see, compared to 2019, still significantly higher intent there. And definitely all of this high intent that we saw here has what's been translating into the market over the last 6 months. So I think, as I said, hopefully we'll be out of this. I know there's a lot of talk that with this vaccine rate going closer and closer, that where the cases are still high, we're still going to be out of lockdown. So fingers crossed that that's the case regardless. And I think we'll continue to see us churning through that. Let's jump over to the rental index. So as I said, exactly the same thing, but this is now just looking at for rent listings instead of for sale listings. It's a lot harder to read too much into this index, given that it's a much lower commitment to rent a property compared to buy a property. And it's something that you could do multiple times a year, whereas typically you don't, buy or sell a house more than once every 7 to 15 years, depending on how long you hold it for. So you do see a lot more activity going on here, but doesn't necessarily mean that the market is stronger or weaker, because it could just be a factor of that churn of people coming through. So nationally, we saw it drop off slightly, albeit still higher than what we saw in 2019, which is surprising, given that we know all of the inner city markets around the country are struggling with the lack of events and migration and overseas students being in and around. And again, as I said, that perhaps could be explained by more churn occurring as people are moving, instead of every, say, 12, 18 months, perhaps they're moving every 6 months. Local market, a lot more choppy here in Melbourne, but obviously, again, same sort of trend we're seeing dropping off as these lockdowns take hold. All right, well, that is it for the information session. As I said, I try to keep it tight. That is very much to give you a bit of a thought process. I've seen a lot of questions popping up already, and hopefully that's to guide how we're going to go now in this knowledge, where I want you to ask me in the panel what you thought about that, what does it mean, and let us help you break it down so that you know what you should be doing. So for those of you that don't know, my name is James Maitland. I'm the General Manager here at Salvo, and I've helped create more than 11,500 homes for people. So at Salvo, we do a lot of things, but ultimately what we're all about across all of our different businesses is helping you create a home. So it doesn't matter whether you've got a current home and you're just looking to refinance a mortgage, right down to if you're starting that very first part of your journey and just renting a property for the first time. We can help you anywhere you are across that full spectrum of home ownership and creating a home for yourself. Joined on the panel today, I've got Greg Arbeck, Jack Gian and Lucas Karras. These guys have been feverishly looking at all of your questions, getting ready and prepared for when I start throwing them at them. So they're excited to get stuck into it. For those of you that haven't done this before and are not sure, there's two easy ways to ask. Perhaps the easiest way that everyone does is to put it in the Q&A, jump in, put it in, and away you go. If you prefer, you can, of course, raise your hand and we'll unmute you and let you ask live. And feel free to jump away either way. All right, so let's call it time on there, and we're going to move into the second section. As I said, this is the knowledge part of today's session, where we'll be answering all of your questions. So if you haven't already, put them in and get stuck into it. I'm going to ask the first question because I've seen a few popping up on my screen just off to the right. So spring selling season, those of us that have been in real estate forever will know this is our favourite time of the year, where we do a ton of transactions and everyone feels like selling. Spring is obviously 6 days away, September through to November. Why is it so popular? Why does everyone say it's one of the key rules to only sell your house during springtime?
Yeah, James, I think if you look at the history of it, if you look at over 10 years, it's true. People seem to want to sell between September and November. And then if you look at that, generally speaking, it's about a 15% increase over any other season, generally speaking. So the trend is definitely September to November is where people are trying to sell. And I think, as you were saying, probably more likely because we've got good weather. The grass is starting to look good. You can get the gardens looking nice. And I think that's what the reason is. A lot of people start saying, it's feeling good, let's sell at this particular time. Definitely the trend.
So, Greg, the grass is greener, as they say, in the springtime, quite literally.
Absolutely. The grass is greener, definitely. Their gardens are looking better. Everybody starts feeling excited. So, yes, if you look at the trend, it has always been that, specifically also in the major centres like Melbourne, Sydney, and even ACT, you can see a huge increase. That's where everybody tries to sell.
And I guess, you talk about the nicer weather. I guess also, summer, December, January, school holidays, a lot of people go away. So perhaps that's why, we try and get everything in that spring period rather than trying to go across the Christmas break.
And I think also as we get more into summer again, we talk about the grass getting browner because it gets too hot. So I think it's there's a short window where everything is looking beautiful. People have come out of the dreadfully cold winters, and that is traditionally the right time to sell.
Okay. So let's be realistic about it. The entire state of New South Wales is in lockdown. Victoria in lockdown. ACT in lockdown.
Hang on.
Is there anyone else that matters?
I'm going to get some Valium. Hang on 1 second, Jim.
So, we just talked about it. Spring starts in 6 days.
Yep.
It just ran through where we went with auction and the huge numbers that are withdrawing the listings from auction here in Victoria. Obviously, Sydney, no one is really listing unless they really feel like they've got a guaranteed winner or they're desperate. How does it compare to last year, and are these lockdowns going to have an effect? And what can we expect? If people are thinking about selling or buying, is spring going to be, as you said, as normal, or how is it going to play out?
Definitely not. Okay, so when we have a look at, if we try and compare what happened last year, we would like to say, everything's going to be fantastic, but comparing to last year, there was definitely a major drop-off where vendors or people wanting to sell are not that confident that they're going to get the best sort of deal. So as you've quite accurately said, people are withdrawing their properties. So I think the season's going to start off a bit slower. However, if we follow the trend which happened last year, we then we start seeing a catch-up.
So are we thinking, Greg, that what you're saying is because perhaps we can't travel overseas and go on these big holidays, that it's going to do similar to what we saw last year, that there isn't really going to be a Christmas shutdown bar, the sort of public holiday, 1 or 2 weeks there, and we're going to see it keep going through into summer as the grass starts to get less green.
It gets so the grass is being green, but the fact is then people have missed, they didn't there weren't enough properties. People were the confidence that you couldn't get out to have a look. But if we see the trend of what happened last year, and that's any way we can look at it, we start seeing that there's a catch up, and then between once we open again and things like that, that people will start catching up and the market will continue to be strong.
All right, so obvious question. I've seen a few coming up as you've been chatting. That all makes perfect sense if you're a seller. We're seeing record price growth, fantastic results week after week in terms of clearance rates and so forth. It makes only sense you'd wait and you could just keep going. But what about buyers? Because it takes two to tango. How are they sitting? Obviously, how are these lockdowns affecting them? What is this having a big impact? And perhaps are these sellers, should they be listing just today to grab whatever they can?
I think, James, the way is the way is a lot more better than the last year. We had the same time, roughly same time and the same period of lockdown this year. So we've seen, first of all, the mortgage holiday, we call the loan deferral, as a very low number compared with the 2020, we have a lockdown. Second of all, we've seen like the price discount when selling the property is very, very minimal. The third of all, we've seen the very low number of the distressed sales on the market. So this is the will far better than last time we have lockdown in 2020.
Okay, so why is it different then? Because I guess arguably you could look at it and say, well, it's worse than it was last year because now New South Wales and Sydney are in lockdown, whereas before it was just poor old Victoria. And we obviously had all of that JobKeeper and everything going on. We now don't have quite those same government help. Why is it different then? Why is it so much more positive and people are still prepared to buy when, last year everyone was holding their money very tight and close to their chest?
I think it's a major reason is the fact is, yes, you're right. And the situation, especially in New South Wales, is worse than the last time we have lockdown. It's had more cases and, through in the community. But first of all, we're still having the support and from the bank and the government. This is not just only the financial support from the household, from the people. It's also giving them the lot more confidence through the whole lockdown period. Second of all, I think we have the sixth lockdown already. So we learned about this from the experience. We know how we can dealing with the lockdown. And also we all realized that the lockdown won't be go forever. We will open up sooner because currently we have a very quick going up rate of the vaccine rate. By the way, thanks, James, and sent me the SMS last night to remind me to book the vaccine.
Of course, I want to make sure I'm doing my part as an employer, getting you all out there and getting the jab. I think everyone's done it. We obviously have a lot of young people in our organisation that have been waiting to get their jabs. So I made sure I SMS'd everyone.
Yeah, I think that's very, very useful because it's actually give us the more strong confidence we will go out of this lockdown. We will reopen very shortly. And the third reason is being same as we're talking about before and through the last year lockdown, because people, they can't go out for the holiday, they can't spend any money. So quite lots of the money being saved by the household. This could be used for the buying the property. I'll give you the example. So I just reading from the figures from the Reserve Bank. Is about $55 billion was deposited into the offset account and the withdrawal accounts around the country in the first quarter of this year. So
that's $55 billion of new money.
Yes.
In first quarter 2021 that's gone into people's offset accounts. So effectively, the repayments of mortgage principal, albeit temporary, that's occurred just in the first 3 months of 2021.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so I think those three major reasons just to make the people, first of all, we used to lockdown. We know how we can dealing with the corona, and also the reaction is we'll keep looking to buying the property.
All right, good. So let me ask you this. I've seen a few people, I think more just querying my topic about the piggy bank, but let me ask you this. The prices are going up. People are paying down their loans. So naturally, they're getting more and more equity built up into the homes. And I guess the natural thing is to then say, well, I've got that equity. Could I go and refinance out, get some money out or whatever? Does anyone have an idea as to, what kind of amount of money is getting refinanced and actually drawn out as new money at all?
Yes, James, I was actually reading an article about that. And last year alone, in the last 12 months, we have seen $93 billion. That's billion, $93 billion.
Okay, right. So $93 billion, that's obviously gone somewhere. But what are the options? If people are there and they've got this equity built up in their home, what are some of the options they could do? Obviously, they could go and refinance it, but are there other options? And if they do refinance, what should they be using that money for?
Look, I mean, some of the people are using some of that equity to renovate, so improve the house they live in. Other people buy cars. The smarter ones like ourselves are buying investment properties. But some of them might use some of that money to support struggling small businesses during the lockdowns. The other part of your questions is that having now a lower LVR gives you the bargaining power to get a better rate for your loan and negotiating with the banks.
So, I guess what you're saying is, particularly for those people that perhaps had a really high LVR and were paying a premium for that, and now able to go and refinance and effectively reset themselves, get rid of guarantees if they had them, mortgage insurance and so forth, and effectively save money without actually having to do anything because they're now able to use that equity to de-risk, I guess, their loan to the bank.
100%, James. You're 100% right. Property values have gone up so much. And I can give you a quick example. Let's say you purchased a house in 2019 and you borrowed 80%. And if you paid interest and principal, just because of the median prices that have increased in Melbourne, to be more specific, from 710, now that same house is worth 946. That's a profit of $236,000, which reduces your LVR from 80% back in 2019 to just 58% today. So there's your equity straight away there.
Okay. So, that would be very attractive to any of those banks out there wanting your business, or alternatively, as you said, you could take it back up to that 80%, draw out a big chunk of that uplift, use it to make improvements, or those of you that are smart, that are focusing on appreciating assets, could obviously use that as a deposit to buy an investment property, or even help out family get into the property market as well.
0409 100 090, and I'll help you find a solution for that money.
I love that. What was the number again, Lucas?
I don't want to get Gregory upset. It's okay.
Good. Okay, so I had a lot of questions over the weekend from people saying, like how hard it is. We know that first home owners are struggling to put together a deposit. We did talk about last week, I think Greg ran through with a lot of you on the line in terms of why it's becoming more affordable now for first home buyers if they have the deposit. But why, I guess the typical formula that we see is, in life, you get your first job and whatever you have, you spend. You get a little bit of a pay rise. You go from, I think my first job at Village Cinema was $7.95 an hour at the candy bar, and I spent everything I had. Then, I got a bump to $9.50, and instead of saving that extra $2, I spent it. And you keep going and going and going. And obviously, as you get a little bit older, you get more sensible, and you start renting a place, then you buy your first place, then you say, well, hang on, I can afford another place because I've got more and more and more, and keep going. But we're not seeing wage growth. We know that's one of the primary drivers why the Reserve Bank is saying they're going to leave interest rates at record lows until at least 2024, potentially even longer now with these extended lockdowns that we're seeing. So if wage growth isn't there, why do prices keep on going up if people don't have more money to spend?
I think, James, the reason is we have currently the historically low interest rate. That's the major reason for the people who are still willing to buy, even they couldn't say the pay growth in the last 12 or 24 months. So I'll be a little bit upset when we're talking about the pay rise.
I am starting to sweat. You can't see it on here, but I'm talking pay rise and I'm thinking, oh no, open myself up. But boys, I reckon it was one of you guys that jumped on and were asking all those questions.
But the good thing is, we don't forget, we actually got getting the pay rise because we have the historic lower interest rate, which makes the loan repayment is much more easier than before. So we don't really need to have the gross payment or high income to sustain our loan repayments. So this can be trans into the another kind of the pay rise from the Reserve Bank. So I think that's the reason for the people, they're still willing to buy, spending the money to pay the dream home, even they couldn't get a pay rise because the current situation of the COVID.
So basically it's okay. The Reserve Bank has given everyone a pay rise by reducing, or at least everyone that owns a home, by reducing the interest rates so low that everyone effectively has more spare money because they're spending less on their mortgage payments and more left for disposable spending.
Yes.
And I guess that's probably what's driving so much in offset. I think those of you that are smart will know whatever money you have, you typically spend. So, one of the best strategies to get ahead, it's a tried and tested one, is to make more than the minimum repayment. And build up that offset. So as Jack said, there's $55 billion of new money gone into offset just in the first 3 months of 2021. So obviously those of you that are enjoying the pay rise and you're spending it on Uber Eats, Netflix, Stan, whatever it is, just think whether you really need that, and perhaps because you could afford to pay the higher repayments previously, if you're still safe in your job and you're still getting the same amount of money, it could be wise to at least try to keep up those same level of payments, rather than just spending the money on things that do you really need.
And also, James, I want to say another reason for current booming housing market is because we experienced the historic low number of the stock. So currently, when you're looking to buy, the property is, you can only buy one property, but at the same time, it's about 6 to 12 people they also looking to buy. So you facing like the big competition, like the Lucas always talking about the FOMO. So there's a fear of missing out. So it's people currently thinking, okay, it's time to buy because we won't be able to stay in the good property or many options on the market.
Yeah, definitely a driving factor. Perhaps not. I think Lucas gave us the advice last year when it came to investment property. Think with your head, not your heart. Which I don't think FOMO fits into to that advice, does it, Lucas?
No, not at all, unfortunately.
Right, okay. All right, so let's move track for a moment. People are not getting more in their wages. They're struggling to put together a deposit. Everyone's looking at ways to save. And I know this is something we face in our business all the time, where people have got an investment property and they choose to manage the property themselves, or they've just bought a property and we offer to manage it for them and they say, no, I want to manage it themselves. I won't tell you what happens in about 3 or 4 months after they make that decision, but it's definitely something that people can do and they can save some dollars. I guess the typical thing is, there's a lot of reasons and traps to look out for. But, one of the main things we always talk about is, what is your time worth? And the time that you're now going to have to invest in terms of managing that yourself, is that a good use of your time? Or could you be doing better things, either by earning more income or spending that with quality time with family and friends. So, let's assume people want to go down that path, because for some people it can be a good option. What are some of the dangers to look out for and the pitfalls that people need to be aware of if they do decide to go and manage their own property by themselves?
Well, James, look, the amount of money that is paid to an agency to manage your property, look after your investment, is a drop in the ocean, let alone the commercial risk you're taking by not having someone professional to handle and look after that for you. After all, that is a huge investment for you. So it's got to be done right. So there are some things that people that choose to do it themselves have to look out for. And let me start, first of all, by saying, be prepared to take control. So after you are lucky enough to find the perfect candidate to be your tenant, the landlord needs to secure the bond through the correct legal channels in the state that they are. You got to do a condition report, or some people call it an ingoing inspection report. You got to chase any unpaid rent, negotiate rent increases, deal with rent moratoriums in times of crisis, as we saw last year, organize maintenance, and deal with disputes. You must log every single expense, every bit of maintenance, and give this sort of attention to detail that you would give your day job for it to be successful. Otherwise, you can all get easily lost in the admin of it. Number two is passing on the paperwork. Landlords need to get up to speed with the relevant legislation in the state. In addition to the tenant application, bond and lease documents have to be lodged. There are rules to how often a landlord can visit the property, how often they can put the rent up, or how much they can put the rent up, or when it comes time to ask a tenant to leave. All the paperwork and compliance can't take up much of your time. It can take up a huge amount of your time. But for a property manager, this is a day-to-day thing. They know what to do. They know what calls to form, what forms to download and fill out. So it sort of takes care of all that for you. Now, consider the relationship. Some of the landlords that decide to manage the property themselves become too close with the tenant. Now, remember, this is only a transactional relationship. Okay, it's business. So some of the landlords get too attached. And to give you an example, they don't put up the rent as often as they should. So it means that they're missing out on making money in the investment, which is what they have this property for. Lastly, is dealing with difficulties. Now, what happens if your tenant falls behind in rent? If they fall in hard times, so they can't pay rent at all. I personally had that during COVID, for an example. Then you need to go to the tribunal. Now, you would want somebody experienced to deal with this kind of difficult stuff, and not you having to deal with all these things. Can you imagine? We know from experience, on a Sunday, I got people running in when I'm in the office. Oh, I locked myself out. This thing isn't working. It's something, imagine being the owner, and they've got your details, and you get calls every day or every couple of days. It takes up a lot of your time. So it's always.
How would I get to have my Sunday afternoon nap if I've got the tenant calling wanting me to come and open it for them?
Exactly. So look, having a professional, it all comes down to how much your time, how much you value your time. All right.
So, it clearly, to me, this is a classic example of it's easy to have all this information, but you've got to have that knowledge and that expertise and experience in order to apply it. So I think, no one or very few people would ever think to go and do their own legal work. They would always employ a lawyer because, they don't believe they have that expertise. And I guess listening to Lucas's shopping list of all the issues and things you've got to be across, it should be exactly the same when it comes to property management. Having an investment property can be one of the best decisions you ever make. It can also turn out to be a nightmare, and not because of the property, but because of the management time that's involved, issues that come across, and a fairly large chunk of them could be avoidable. And that's really where you need a professional to know what they're doing to make sure you navigate through that. I mean, I know here in Victoria, we've had a raft of, I think, 158 legislative changes that came into play, I think, March this year. And that's had a huge impact. And I can guarantee you that, I know what our guys in the office have been doing, the countless hours of training, tests they've had to do, requalifications, going through changing systems, paperwork, updating, understanding how it's dealt with at the tribunal, that if you're managing just your own property or maybe two properties, you're not going to have that time or energy. You're not going to have that experience and that industry, networking behind you to be on top of that. So I think as we always say, it's fine to be penny wise, but don't be pound foolish. Save a few dollars by saying perhaps to your property manager, get 3 quotes and get it done cheaper, or, working a few things there, but still have someone professional to do it. Let alone, I'll tell you the number one issue we know with a lot of people, they go to their accountant, they don't have any record of any expenses. And for whatever they might have paid a property manager to maintain that ledger, have the accurate records, print out a nice end of year statement that they can just give to their accountant. All the documents are saved and their accountant says, how easy is this? Does it in 5 minutes. They probably pay their accountant 2 to 3 times the cost that it might have cost them to have their property manager do the work for them. So, those are the sort of hidden costs that I think are really important to think about. But for some of you, it could be a good decision. It might be a right decision. So I just recommend for most of you that your time could be better spent on something else. All right, I can see I've got a few messages here from the guys saying we've gone way over time. So let's call it time there on that section, because I do want to just make a few quick closing comments. Today was great, but there's more to do. And the way that I see it is you've got 3 choices. You can do what everyone does, and that's to do nothing. Now, what do I mean by doing nothing? Don't make any changes. Don't take on board what we've discussed. Think about some of those nuggets that the guys have given you, understanding that, taking that concept of information and knowledge and moving it to apply to yourself. Now, that's okay, because for some of you might be doing really well and you just wanted to join in because you were bored. Thank you. I really appreciate you joining us. Love all the questions that have come through. But let me just say, if you don't make any changes, then don't expect to get a different result. So if you are the first home buyer and you've been plugging it away at it for forever and ever, you're going to need to make some changes to be able to achieve what you want to do. Now, we didn't talk much about first home buyers today. And, from week to week, it's always different. It's always fresh. But you really need to be able to understand what's going on and adapt and change and move with it. So what I hope that everyone does as a bare minimum is takes on board the concept that I spoke about, the difference between information and knowledge, how we work through everything this week, and apply that formula yourself and go out, make some changes, achieve those goals that you want. But what I hope you do is you take the alternative path, is actually do it with us. Let us help you, let us guide you down that path and really show you how you can fast forward that journey. It's always the best way, like I mentioned before, and Lucas has just talked through a detail about having an expert and a property manager. It's exactly the same concept, having someone that has that experience, has that wealth of knowledge that can help guide you through that journey is invaluable, and I guarantee that you'll get benefit out of it. So this method is not for everyone. I would love to say that everyone on today's line we can help, but we're not going to be able to help all of you. Who is it for? Well, ultimately, if you were involved today, you understood what we were talking about, you got excited, you put your questions in there, that's the kind of people we want. Those are the prepared to take those actions, get motivated, get involved, understanding this concept, as I said. And at the end of the day, you've got to be prepared to roll up your sleeves and actually do a bit of work. Now, not a lot of work, but you've got to be prepared to actually think about it, create that database of actionable knowledge and move forward with it. So if that does sound like you, how can we help you? Well, I've thought about this, and perhaps the most dedicated and active way that we can help you is to meet up one-on-one. Now, obviously, with lockdowns, we can't do that face-to-face. So it could be as simple as a phone call, could be a Zoom like we're doing today, so we can actually see each other and talk through. We're talking about a really, really a small time commitment I'm asking for you. I'm only asking for you to give us about 15 to 20 minutes. And I guarantee you, even with that minimal commitment, this is the easiest step that you can actually get some actionable knowledge out of and can actually expect to get real results. So typically, as I said, 15 to 20 minutes, we'll just have a bit of a chat about what you've been up to, ask us any questions, really get an understanding where you are on that home ownership journey. So as I said, this is for everyone. It doesn't matter if you're a seasoned investor with 20, 30 properties, or you're just starting the journey and just looking to rent your first property. Doesn't matter where you are there, perhaps you're just upgrading to a new home. We can help you on that journey. We can provide you advice. And as I said, we've got a multitude of businesses that can help everyone, no matter where you are on that journey. Now, what we hope you get out of this is that at the end of this, you'll have some action steps and how we can move forward. And for some of you, we won't be a good fit. You won't fit with us, and we won't be able to help you. But if you're prepared to take the action, then I can guarantee you, if you do this, this will be the smallest time commitment you can possibly make and still get a realistic expectation of an outcome. So if that does sound like you and you want to do that, it's really, really simple. There's 3 ways to do this. The first is jump on the link in the chat and you can book one of those sessions. The second is if you're joining us on Zoom, your web browser should have been redirected to the booking page. And lastly, we will send you a follow-up email with the details and you can do that. Those of you that are watching this live from Facebook, I believe the link is in our bio, or if not, jump on our website and you'll see, I think it's on the homepage, a link to book one of these sessions. Now, before we go, I want to just leave you with this thought. I'm dressed casually today. I was dressed casually last week. And those of you that have been following along for a long time will know that in the June, July school holidays, I got away for 3 to 4 days with the family. We went to Hamilton Island. It was a great break, albeit we landed to go into lockdown the next day. I think that was lockdown 4, 5 maybe, who knows. But while we were there, having a great time and, creating those memories as you do with family and part of the reason you go on these holidays. And my eldest daughter said to me, Dad, I'd love to watch the sunrise. In part, I know she wanted to get a TikTok video, but also, it's one of those experiences that that's great to do. And we'd been talking about climbing to the top of the mountain in Hamilton Island and watching that sunrise. So I said, sure, love to, let's do it tomorrow morning. Now, later that night, I jumped on my phone, looked up on the internet to see when the sun rise, and it was 4:47 a.m. in the morning. Now, all of you know, one of the joys of a holiday is being able to sleep in. So I was just about to say to her, Isabella, let's not do that. I don't want to get up that early. But I thought, no, I've got to be prepared to actually take that action, do it, because I know that's what she wants to do, and I know we'll have fun. So I set my alarm, went to sleep, and what felt like 2 minutes later, all of you know what the iPhone alarm sounds like. And what did I do? I did that easy thing, that big snooze button. I pressed snooze, I rolled over. Now I know that's easy to do. And I did it. But thankfully, a couple of minutes later, I realized what I'd done. I jumped up. I thought, no, she's excited. I woke her up. We ran to the top of the mountain. We got there in time. We enjoyed the sunset. She took a TikTok video. It was great. And it was one of those experiences that I'm always going to remember. Those of you with kids will know that they grow up very quickly. And before you know it, they're ready to move out of home. And it feels like you were just changing the nappy only a couple of weeks ago. But the moral of this story and what I want you to think about is it was so easy for me to hit snooze. It would have been so easy for me to say to her, don't do it. But I didn't. I took the action and I created a wonderful memory for both myself and for my daughter. So, think about it in your own life. Be prepared to take that action. Book one of these sessions that I talked about. Take that action and move forward, because if you don't and you hit the snooze button, I'll do it next week, I'll do it later, you won't move forward. Be like me, achieve the results you want, move forward, take that action and do it. Don't hit the snooze button. Now, that is it from us today. I know we've gone a lot over time. Thank you very much for all of your attention, all of your questions. I really, really appreciate those of you that are tuning in week after week. If you do have any friends, feel free to invite them. We love growing this audience. Next week, we're still in lockdown, so I will be dressed casually at least one more time before I'm back into the suit. So I'll see if I can wear, if I had a Hawaiian shirt, I'd try and wear that just to mix it up. But I will be there. So from me and everyone on the panel today, thank you very much for your time. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. Same time, same place, Wednesday, 2:30 p.m. Thank you very much.